Angus was always a person of the people, and he'd get out in the dance floor and dance with people, and and he was loved by so many people. Probably the most loved DJ in Brisbane ever.
He started off at the independent school in Brisbane, out at Moggill, which is a fairly free school where the kids are allowed to choose their own activities. And that was not right for Angus. He really needed to be in a classroom with white walls and no windows in order to focus. He saw too much going on.
I remember Angus as a very intense child, more energy than you can imagine.
Yeah,
he never stopped. Very creative and really imaginative. He used to do amazing drawings and would be totally wrapped up in it when he was drawing. His imagination was extraordinary.
He'd just constantly drawing pictures of monsters, and King Kong, a favourite. He showed signs very early of being an entertainer. He would perform in front of kids, perhaps a bit of a show-off maybe. Obsessive in a good way, with things he really liked to be into. So he's the kind of guy that he learnt to solve the Rubik's Cube. You could mix it up, give it to him, in a few seconds he's done it.
Completely, not just one side, the whole shebang, faster than anyone I've ever seen. He could do it with his eyes closed, literally could do it with his eyes closed.
With the Rubik's Cube, he worked out how to solve the problem and used to write books about it, and he would sell them at school to his friends.
Also into archery.
Yes,
and,
that's true. Crossbows.
Abseiling and crossbows and stuff. And I remember Mum coming home one afternoon and they were abseiling off the chimney, and we lived in a really high house, and this was a 100-year-old chimney.
He taught me to knife throw, to fire breathe, to juggle, because he was really involved with his circus sports when he was a youth.
Yeah, natural flair for doing crazy ass shit. He showed me juggling one day, right, and he showed me this one way of doing it, then another way of doing it, then one other way of doing it like this and doing it like that, cascades, all these other things, and I thought you could just juggle.
Fire swallowing, riding unicycles.
He's the kind of guy who for some reason, wanted to know how to juggle 3 clubs on whilst riding a unicycle, and did it. He was learning to be a juggling unicycling clown, actually, and that was where the performance part of Angus's nature really came to a fore, I think.
From a really young age, like a really good juggler, and I think that's why he was ambidextrous on the decks.
He wanted to be good at something, and he found music, and I think that's where he wanted his energies to go, like unicycling, like juggling, like the Rubik's Cube, like his artwork. Everything he ever attempted, it had to be, the best in his eyes.
He was the same age as my older brother Peter, and they played together a lot and were, deeply enmeshed in whatever it was that they did.
Well, once Angus and Peter were teenagers, then they started really getting more into like performing arts type stuff. And I remember really clearly, they must have been about 13, 14, so I think this is about 1982, 83, and they started dancing. And that was before it was called break dancing or hip hop or anything like that. They used to call it robot dancing. And they bought these tracksuits. I think it must have taken all their money. And they used to go down to the back of McDonald's in Elizabeth Street. That was a real hangout for young people. And they used to dance to Herbie Hancock's Rocket. That was on a cassette, and other music like Grandmaster Flash. I remember hearing that stuff for the first time then. Yeah. And then Angus got really into, then it was called break dancing, and he was really good at it. So good at it, he got a bald patch on his head from doing so many head spins.
We were going out and breaking with the Aboriginal kids on the weekend, and that was pretty much our clique. He was the best head spinner in Brisbane back in the early 80s by far. And even up till, in his 30s, he would just bust out a head spin any odd time, in nightclubs, whatever. He never lost that ability to do that.
Met Angus in about 1983, 84. It was at one of the Electric Troopers, which were a breakdance crew back then, and I was in their backyard, and he had a big bit of plastic set up in the backyard, and they had all soap on it, spraying water, and Angus was doing a backspin on there. And that's when I met him.
The McDonald's in the city and out the Myer Centre there was competitions and stuff for breakdancing going on. Just congregation of groups would come up, someone would get some cardboard, stick it out, and there you go. And that's when, you had the B-Boy All-Stars forming. And
we used to all go breakdance at McDonald's, and that's where it all sort of strung off from. And then we went up to King George Square, and then I remember Angus used to always get RCF to jimmy the power lock thing open so he could plug his decks in.
You weren't allowed to do this sort of thing. You weren't, they didn't like you dancing on the pavement outside McDonald's and stuff, but we were doing it, and they just let it all happen, I guess a bit because of the explosion of everything coming from America. The kids wanted to do it, They wanted to get into this. They wanted to look fly, We wanted to wear the British Knights sneakers, the tracksuits, the feeler, And some of them started thinking, this is, these gangs, but we weren't messing around causing damage. The skinheads, they were doing more of that.
Everyone that was breakdancing was getting chased by the cops everywhere around the back of McDonald's in the city and Post Office Square. And it was also very fashionable at the time for skinheads to chase breakdancers.
Behind McDonald's, people used to go on a Saturday afternoon and stuff because they had a shiny surface. And then after a while, we discovered Post Office Square, which became this huge, you'd get like up to 200 kids there playing music. And people walk around town, go to Rocking Horse Records, Kent Records and stuff like that. But then at a certain time around 7:30, that's where everyone met.
You had all sorts of characters, back then, obviously graffiti and stuff like, hip hop, the whole sort of thing was somewhat new, partly illegal.
Then there was the graffiti culture as well that came out of the breakdancing culture.
Wicked styles back then too, Just the amount of, arrows coming through letters, connecting, It sort of reminds you all with the popping too, that's what the letters are like, the shapes locking, through. That's how you kind of looked at it, you know what I mean? You dance to it, look at it, implement it, and it goes from graph straight into everything, like, the way you move your fingers on a record when you start cutting.
Me and Angus were DJing at Indooroopilly High School when in the first few months when we met. We had to pick a sport. Somehow we managed to wrangle the position of DJing for the roller skaters. So we would just play tunes, and so it wasn't great cardio work or anything, but it suited us. Got all the facts straight. Originally we had some CJC turntables. They just didn't cut it, so we ended up finding out that Technics 1200s were the way to go. Angus bought 2 sets, before anyone else I knew of, and then it was just a matter of just doing it, practicing. It just felt right. Couldn't stop him. Couldn't stop anyone who was into it. The hip-hop back then, it was very linked to breakdancing. A lot of the music of the breakdance was part of it was electro, and part of it was funk. He'd been going out to clubs just, about the time I met him. So often on a Friday night particularly, we'd be dressed up, sort of in club gear, and we'd go down and we'd spend a good couple of hours down in the coffee shop earlier on in the night.
Across from King George Square was this coffee shop that I think belonged to part of the church or something. It was like a hall there. And there was all these butcher's papers on the tables where all these dudes are doing graph and stuff.
They had nice polished wooden floors, guys would go in, break, ghetto blasters, tunes, Yeah, it was cool.
And there's all these dudes back spinning and doing swipes and doing all these moves, and I was just like, wow, this is wicked.
Great hall to breakdance with a stage, and I had a stereo there, so it was like, stereo? We're there. probably him going to nightclubs as well and being into the funk music probably would have been an interest of his. It was just like, man, what are you doing? I'm just like, this is what we playing records and scratching and stuff. And I just remember his face. It was just like, wow, man, this is amazing. But just seeing it, someone else just do it, sort of it inspired him.
The whole hip-hop scene and was somewhat underground back then. It's not like it is now where everyone's sort of downloading tracks and whatnot. You know, you basically had to go out and seek it.
You know, it was hard to find some of this stuff. It wasn't played on the radio here in Australia at all. It was just really underground. It was very underground stuff.
It wasn't like, okay, here's your hip-hop, like a Triple J or go to a website or anything like that. You couldn't even, who do you call? Who do you call to go, where do I find hip-hop?
Oh, Tony Records. Yeah, I got that.
We'd ring or write to record stores in the States and ask them what they had, and they'd come back with big lists, and we just had a shopping list. You know, we had to put a lot of effort into it. Some of the classic hip-hop albums were starting to come out. 85, 86, there was some amazing stuff coming out. And then scratching, which had been big in the breakdance era, and we always loved it. It was just coming into its own even more. People were getting more and more scratching skills. What was, you know, originally just blew your mind with, you hear Rocket and all those things, and it's just scratching all through it, you know, Grandmaster DMX, all those guys. Well, you had the big names like LL Cool J and you had Cut Creator, and they were great, but then you got these super skilled DJs come on board, like, you know, Jazzy Jeff, for instance. And these were competition DJs. They were releasing hip-hop records, but these guys were going in the DMC and other DJ mixing competitions in the States.
Well, the DMC competition videos were starting to come through, and so we'd watch a bit of that as well, quite a lot of it actually, and do the whole pausing and rewind and back again. And
we would watch the videos and we'd see what they were doing. They would have a, you know, you'd have a set, you know, might be 5 or 6 minutes.
DMC only started in Australia in '88, so, you know, people were still beat mixing at the competitions, you know, not knowing that it's like a trick scratch competition.
That was the bad old days of DMC when the judges would be like dance music DJs or someone from the local FM station, you know.
You've got guys in the club that are 10 years older than you that are used to playing Jimmy Barnes and, you know, male stripper. Of course it's like, you know, some dude who gets loud applause for Backspin and Madonna Get Into the Groove, where you're doing like 2 copies of James Brown, which I've probably never even heard in a club anyway. Of course it's gonna, like, you know, it's gonna destroy you. It's like, what the fuck's going on, you know?
And you might know as Angus. Angus is all around Angus now,
In the 1989 DMC, Dominic Hogan won it, but they were good friends. You know, there was a rivalry there.
Get Angus cutting up on both hands, doing this polyrhythmic scratching, and, you know, wouldn't even place. In the late 80s, he should have been representing Australia at the World DMCs for sure.
I looked over and Angus was in the gutter with his head in his hands, sort of thing, and like just took it so heavy, so hard, sort of thing. And, you know, I think I might have said something like, "Oh mate, you know, it's rigged," and, you know, or something, you know, whatever. But that image of leaving, yeah, I still remember it today. He took it very hard.
When I first met him, I thought he was a wild, crazy guy, man, to be honest with you.
He was just mad into Cash money. Cash has just got a way of getting up there and selling everything he does and just looking funky and, you know, keeping it neat.
The last night out that we had together was actually a DJ Cash Money at West End, and it was just, yeah, it was magic. He was just in his element with Cash. Out on the balcony after the gig, Cash just tore the house down.
And the crowd went crazy. And for him, I remember he was sweating so much, man, like his shirt was like, it was crazy. I was like, man, you sure sweat a lot. He was like, yo, you just inspired me to do what I'm doing. So I was, you know, for me, that was flattery to me, man. So when I had the actual chance to actually meet him at this party, and he was just showing me his skills right in front of me, man, I just thought he was awesome. And matter of fact, the club that we were playing was a real commercial club, so they weren't used to seeing that type of DJing in this club. And he just was like, excuse my French, he was like, fuck it, man. let's do the DMC stuff. If you look at the whole concept of a turntable, it was just designed just to put the needle on the record and leave it be. But what Grandmaster Flash and Grand Wizard Theodore have done, everybody puts their own little stamp on it. The turntables are an instrument, man. I mean, it's an art form.
Angus was the first person who instilled in me that DJing was when you got on a turntable and you manipulated the record, you were playing a musical instrument.
There's a craft to it. You know, there's a lot of technical things about DJing, whether you can scratch or not, riding the pitch, mixing in key, just working the floor. There's all these things that come into it that if you're got no skills at all and you just go and think you can play music to people, you're going to fail. Look at Paris Hilton, man.
Angus had that touch where he would just like, you know, be always spot on, no matter, you know, how fast the BPM was.
A genius, really. Way ahead of his time. Nobody could scratch like Angus. I mean, he just practiced and practiced and practiced day and night, you know, both hands.
I saw him warming up for Soul to Soul at Festival Hall. I'd never heard a DJ scratch like that before. Just doing crazy cuts, like polyrhythmic scratching, you know, really record-intensive stuff, but just amazing. I'd never seen anything like that before.
Just that wispy sort of scratching, it was like you really sort of, you know. Just flow, real flow, and made a nice melody, you know.
He was world class. He was basically world class.
It will never not be phenomenal. It's just his attention to detail. He must have been doing it like 20 hours a day, every day, just zoning in, and that was his life, and he lived and breathed it.
I'd actually seen him clear people out of his house from an after party so he'd get on and practice all day. He was that serious about it.
Scratching was just incredible. I'd never heard anything like it. It was, you know, leagues ahead of anything else I'd heard. It was amazing. And beat juggling. I'd never even seen beat juggling until I saw him do it. It was incredibly impressive.
Like, he really was a phenomenon. His hand-eye coordination was just, yeah, ridiculous.
The things that Bribe was doing on the turntables, man, was just, I mean, he was on point with everything. The records never skipped with him, man.
He was right up there with any international touring artist, you know. You'd have DJs come from other side of the world who'd heard about him, you know, they're almost in awe.
First time I ever saw Angus was at a Public Enemy concert. I think that was at Festival Hall in 1990. I was up the back of the room with some mates, and I didn't know Angus then, but I just remember Public Enemy were calling him up on stage, and he didn't want to go up, he was too shy.
Yo, check this out. I just want to thank a DJ named Angus, right? Yo, where's he at? Y'all know if he's in here?
They just happened to walk around town, so he was there. Angus was DJing. Met Flavor Flav, they hung out, he played some records for them, they did a lot of impromptu show. That next night at the concert, Flav just called him out, said, I just want to give a big shout out. And it just happened to capture that moment.
Hey, yo, Angus, come on out here, G. Where you at? Where he at? Is he over here? Is he over here? Where's he at? Come on up, man. Where's he at?
When you hear like an artist like Public Enemy in that early of their career shouting out to one of our homeboys, it's like, wow. We all go over the line together because I know that dude, man. That was like, wow.
I first met Angus when I first became a promoter, and I do the rounds of the record stores, and I met him at Central Station Records when the location was in Fortitude Valley. It was a very flourishing scene back in those days. Although it was very small, people were very passionate. You know what I mean? The music wasn't on the radio, so you know you were either going to hear it in the club or you were going to go and buy it yourself. Central Station is a huge part of Australian dance music culture. Working at Central Station gave him access to import records, you know, before anybody else.
It just opened up his world, the music world, because he couldn't just, you know, order his favourite hip hop in. You'd have to order all the dance music, the house, the club music, and not only that, all the DJs would come in, all the club DJs would come and interact with him. And he was such a people person that he'd connect with all these other DJs.
Definitely his roots were in hip hop, but then he transferred over to dance music, you know, and not just one kind of dance music. He could play so many different styles of dance music, you know, house, techno, hard house, you know, the list goes on. His collection was insane.
With the whole hip hop scene, you know, there was a policy of sort of like no sellout. It's a common sort of catchphrase, you know, with hip hop, you know what I mean, when it comes to things like dance music and even drug culture and things like that.
He had a philosophy that he would not let dance music touch his needles for a lot of years.
He moved over into that, and, you know, some people stayed with him, some people didn't.
And you don't want just somebody just to limit you and say, oh, he's only a hip hop DJ.
Real friends will understand, and those who don't understand maybe aren't your real friends. Should be like, man, that's amazing. This is fucking so good to see what you're doing and what you love.
Somewhere along the line, he realised that if he was going to have a career as a DJ, which is what he really wanted, he was going to have to broaden his horizons a little bit and branch out into playing dance music.
First time I heard one of his Energy House mixtapes, I couldn't believe that he'd actually, like the scratching style that he used at a hip-hop tempo, he was able to smash out over a high BPM tempo. Like, you know, he was just like wrecking it. And, you know, going 3 decks on the Energy House tapes. That stuff was amazing.
He was doing the same things with dance tracks. Nobody else could match it. Like 2 copies, even 3 copies of records together. You know, club and stuff like that. It was just, you know, mind-blowing, basically.
Once you got that club going, man, oh, geez, you know, it was just jammed, mate. Just jammed. You couldn't bloody move, you know? Just pump your fist.
He was at the top of his game. He was probably one of the best in the country at what he was doing within dance music and scratching and having that crossover thing. He was at the top of his game, without a doubt.
And of course I wanted to get up there and have a look, but I couldn't, man. There's always smoke and shit and chicks running and falling over and, you know, Angus, you know. So it was like always hard to see exactly all the skills that was going on. But when he was going off, man, in the centre of the club, that was it. The speakers are rumbling, you know.
You know, he was an enigma to the Brisbane scene. You know, everyone would want to know what time Angus is playing where. You'd base your night around that.
People who know Angus for his club music talk about his scratching as much as hip hop guys, because he wouldn't stop scratching. You know, basically it was musical. You know, you could do a musical, you know, interlude through scratching, mixing, etc. And it was as relevant in club music as it was with hip hop with him.
He would be the first massive crowd pulling DJ in Brisbane. You know, if he was on the bill, you knew it was going to be a big night. So, you know, I think Brisbane owes him a lot.
Brisbane was a really different place then. It was much more of an old, you know, big country town. I know it's a cliche, but I think it's true.
Brisbane was an incredibly conservative city. We had a National Party government for a long time under Joh Bjelke-Petersen, And there were pockets of activism going on right around Brisbane at the time.
The Friday night band thing, the fuck or fight night on Friday night, where everyone went and saw a band and looked at them and went, yep, that's a band. And then they all got drunk and tried to shag each other's girlfriends and all that sort of stuff. It was just like a hideous scene. I think a lot of people felt the same way, which is why there was that punk scene, and there was always been a little groovy scene in Brisbane, but back then it was really little.
I certainly remember when our big brother Robbie first bought like a Sex Pistols single and that kind of thing. We all used to listen to Triple Z, and that was where, as a young person in Brisbane, you looked for some sense of alternative because the mainstream was just really so conservative.
In the underground, there were no constraints on what you could do. It's open to your imagination.
Towards 88, with the plethora of acid house and house sounds that were emerging along with hip-hop, I decided I had that much music in the dance genre to totally dedicate the whole program to just dance music. So from there, the dance music program commenced. My criteria for Crucial Cuts was I wanted fresh music every weekend. We got the reputation of playing the latest sounds and having the best DJs in Brisbane, Australia and the world coming and guesting on the program. Angus approached me to play, and radio was a different avenue for him. Aside from playing in the nightclubs, radio is something different, and he relished the idea of coming and playing a live set every Saturday on the program.
In the early 90s, I used to listen to it all the time because everyone had listened to the show. Most people had recorded it on the days of cassette tapes then. And then they'd go out that night to hear all the songs they'd heard on the dance show. So it was, you just listen to it on rerun over and over again and then go out and party to those tracks. And there were so many good tracks in that era.
Could not wait to go out every week and play those new tunes, and just everyone's so very enthusiastic to it all.
In the early 90s, whether you're at the Tunnel or the Beat, there was just a specific group of people that were into it, maybe, 300 people.
It was a new thing, the dance thing, you know what I mean? It's like a lot of the clubs were very stale, they were still playing the same old music. Rock and roll was there, and we were crying out for something new, so it wasn't that hard because we all knew what we wanted. There was basically an institution and it was called The Beat, and that's where Angus was a resident DJ. But he very quickly became the star there, and the owner of it was very careful to make sure he held an exclusive residency. There was no speaking to any manager. Angus ran it, you know what I mean, and he was quite good at it, you know. And I've seen a couple of his negotiations too, and he was good at doing that too.
Yeah. In what way?
Well, negotiating his fee, he was very good at it.
When the site came along, the scene just exploded.
We didn't have big international DJs initially. It was all the local guys, and the money that we used to put into the production was amazing. You know, if the Ekka was in town, we'd have the Globe of Death on stage, with the motorcyclists going around, which was quite funny because of the fumes. Made it a bit hard for some of the ravers to stomach the dance floor.
Things just expanded from about 93, 94 onwards. Plus you had genres of music coming in, so it wasn't all just in one room. You'd have your main room, then your house room, you might have your hardcore room, and things started changing a lot.
I remember some nights on the door there, you had to, give people money back because they'd come out and go, what's this? You're playing the same song all night,
Angus and I did a really cool night. One night there was supposed to be Sasha and Digweed playing. What happened was there was a storm, right, up in Townsville or something where they were. They couldn't come. So here's 3,000 people at a rave, man, waiting for Sasha and Digweed. The promoter said, look, Angus, get on the microphone, man, tell them they're not coming. Angus is like, no fucking way, I'm not doing that. He's like, no, do it, you everyone loves you, you do it. So I think Angus doubled his rate. He said, right, you're going to have to pay me this much. Do you want me to do that? You know, so Angus got on the microphone and said to the whole crowd, man, Sash and Digweed are held up in Townsville. It's going to be me and DJ Freestyle and whoever else is going to take their spot. But don't freak out, because next week the rave's on with them and everyone's coming for free. But I tell you what, Angus and I had the ball that night because it was a lot of fun. Everyone's pilled up, ready for Sash and Digweed.
He was just someone who lived and breathed and loved music every single day and made that his life.
And he was just so into the music. He'd play your tunes for 2 or 3 hours straight, you know.
He would take my Beatles records, my CDs. He would take my Bee Gees. He would take my Simon and Garfunkel. And I'd go looking for them, but they'd be gone. He would have them. He liked my music. That was the thing. I mean, that was it. Except for Leonard Cohen.
He definitely was one of the very few people that had this insanely acute grasp on musical history as well. And then, that came from there, and you could trace that right back to, then he'd have it on wax. And he'd not just have it on wax, he'd have the American pressing and the European pressing, and he'd usually have, I've got 3 pressings of that one, I've got 6 pressings of that one.
Like, he really was driven by the music and the creativity and stuff. I don't think he did it to be DJ Bribe, DJ Angus.
He did a mixtape once, and it had like De La Soul, Say No Go, but it also had the original where it was sampled from the Hall & Oates song. And that blew my mind because that just showed his range. He just encompassed everything. He just loved everything. He could do any style of music.
He was just a music lover, full stop. That's one thing that I missed out on because of the untimely demise, was he was going to give me a bit of an education on half of the old samples and things like that. So he loved music as a whole.
Did he leave a legacy? Absolutely. And did he create an impact on many people who are still out there working in that industry today? Without a doubt.
The first time I heard Angus was in 2012, and my friend just said, look, you've got to listen to this guy. He's an old school Brisbane DJ, he's not around anymore, and he put on a mix that was Angus playing at the tunnel. He's scratching, the tunes are coming thick and fast, like the mix is just insane, and every new drop I'd just be there like what's happened sort of thing. A lot of younger DJs my age aren't even aware that there was this massive scene, even in Brisbane in the 90s, where you'd get hundreds of people out to a midweek show or something like that. That's definitely what got me into it, was hearing that mix by Angus.
He had a massive influence on dance music in Australia. Just about every flyer, had his name on it, and whether it was Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, whatever. I mean, he was on the bill.
As an aspiring DJ, the moment that you see him do something like, the craziness that he used to pull off, it's like, it can be done. I'm going to learn how to do it.
He inspired me, he inspired a lot of guys,
He'd give me a massage my shoulders. Come on, I want to see you do it. I don't want no bullshit. I don't want no half-assed crap. I just want to see you do it.
I just started mixing then, and Angus he knew I loved DJing and that, so he called me up on stage and gave me my first mix ever. It was Get Down Everybody by Holy Noise, and I threw it in, and he was really supportive, and he'd give me a hug and that, and sometimes he'd make a joke and change the pitch control when you weren't looking.
To actually see a guy in the flesh just rip shit up in front of me, I was like, wow, okay, I want to learn how to do that.
Huge influence, big influence. People would tape his sets, they would try and copy his scratching.
I think he inspired a whole generation of Brisbane DJs, and yet another lot's come through now, so whether they had heard of Angus or not, they owe him a bit because of the ones that he did inspire.
There's still DJs active that were inspired by him and were directly impacted by him. A lot of the younger guys don't even know his legacy like they should.
I'm sure he was fighting self-doubt all the time. He didn't have very many people in the family who were supportive of his work as a DJ. No one understood it. My generation don't have access to that music.
I was always really proud of him because I did used to see his name on posters and all of that. But I think it's one of the sad things when he died, and particularly with his funeral and the wake and everything, when the music community really came together and honoured him, And for us as his family, we suddenly saw all this stuff that we didn't know because we didn't go along necessarily. We weren't there with him all the time. And the older generation I know didn't necessarily see what Angus did as a career. But when he died, we saw it was. We saw that it was more than a career, it was a passion, and that he had so much recognition from his peers and everything.
Everybody felt his music, not just one scene. I think everybody did, hip hop to dance to techno.
Well, I always envisioned hanging out with Angus on the porch when we were old, I just knew he was the kind of guy that we would always be friends, and no matter how old we were, we would be hanging out somewhere.
He was a good dude, man. I mean, I'm glad I had the chance to meet him, man. I really am.
I still miss him. I miss him all the time. I miss him like a brother.
Well, his craziness, I definitely miss his craziness.
His loving presence, his steadfast.
Yeah.
Loyalty.
Oh, he was very loving, very kind.
But I still feel his presence now. Like, when you get over the initial sadness, it's like just embracing knowing this character. And his energy is easy to tap into for me because he's so unique. If you want to talk to him, I can hear exactly what he'd say back. And it always makes me laugh.